FTD doesn't scream, it whispers. And, I didn't really know anything about young onset dementia prior to Bruce getting his diagnosis. It's very gray to know, where did Bruce stop and where did his disease kick in?
In 2026, Bruce Willis lives quietly with his family, receiving round-the-clock care after being diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. Few would imagine that this man was once one of Hollywood's most powerful action stars of the 1990s. At age 70, Willis is described as physically stable, but significantly declined in language and cognition. He no longer appears in public. His days revolve around simple activities and constant support from his wife, Emma Heming Willis, and their children. But few people realize that long before his official collapse in 2022, the tragedy had already begun, unfolding silently for years before the public understood what was happening. Career foundation and life before the illness. Bruce Willis did not enter Hollywood as a star. In the early 1980s, he took small television roles, including brief appearances on Miami Vice. His first major breakthrough came with the series Moonlighting, 1985 to 1989, where he played Detective David Addison. The role earned him an Emmy Award in 1987 and brought him into the public spotlight. In 1988, Willis was cast as Officer John McClane in Die Hard at the time. Several studios doubted the decision because he was primarily known for comedic performances. The film grossed more than $140 million worldwide and quickly set a new standard for action movies. His portrayal of a vulnerable hero, injured, exhausted, and afraid, distinguished him from the muscle-bound stars of the era. After the film's success, Willis became a top choice for big-budget productions. The 1990s marked the peak of his career. Willis moved easily across genres. He continued his success with the Die Hard sequels and proved his comedic appeal in Look Who's Talking, which performed far beyond expectations at the box office. In Pulp Fiction, 1994, he accepted a lower salary for the opportunity to work with director Quentin Tarantino, a decision later viewed as strategically wise. By 1997 and 1998, The Fifth Element and Armageddon had become global blockbusters. Despite his fame, Willis repeatedly emphasized that he did not see himself as a legend. In a late 1990s interview, he said acting was a skill you have to keep learning. He also admitted that action films were physically demanding and sometimes left him exhausted. This grounded attitude helped maintain his image as a disciplined professional rather than a distant celebrity. Willis's personal life also drew significant attention. In 1987, he married Demi Moore. The two became one of Hollywood's most influential couples and had 3 daughters, Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah. When they divorced in 2000, both stated that their children would remain their top priority. They maintained a friendly relationship for years afterward, a rarity in the entertainment industry. In 2009, Willis married model Emma Heming. They later welcomed 2 daughters, Mabel and Evelyn. Friends described him as a devoted father who often handled school runs himself and tried to shield his children from early exposure to Hollywood fame. In several public conversations, he warned that the entertainment industry could be harsh and that children deserved a normal upbringing. The period from 2000 to 2010 reflected a shift in his role choices. Willis appeared in Sin City, 2005, and returned as John McClane in Live Free or Die Hard, 2007, which grossed over $380 million worldwide. At the same time, he began accepting roles in lower-budget films or projects released directly to video, when his name appeared in The Expendables, 2010. Some observers noticed that his workload had increased significantly. This trend prompted questions. Some believed Willis's career was slowing down. Others assumed he was leveraging his fame to maximize earnings. At the time, very few people connected these changes to potential health concerns. The contrast became increasingly clear. On one side stood Bruce Willis of his golden era, a star who once guaranteed box office success. And on the other, an actor making brief appearances in smaller productions. What no one realized was that behind this shift were early signs of decline, quietly forming and setting the stage for the most tragic chapter of his life. Early warning signs and public misunderstanding. The first signs appeared years before any official diagnosis. Around the early 2000s, colleagues began noticing subtle changes in Bruce Willis's performances. His delivery grew flatter. His energy seemed reduced. During a 2013 television interview, he appeared irritated, gave short answers, and struggled to engage with the host, behavior that many viewers interpreted as arrogance rather than concern. On film sets, practical adjustments became increasingly common. Scripts were shortened for his character. Dialogue was simplified. Willis often used a small earpiece, known in the industry as an earwig, so assistants could feed him lines in real time. Scenes were staged to limit his movement, and his screen time shrank noticeably. In the 2020 film Hard Kill, despite being the top-billed star, he appeared for roughly 7 minutes to the public. These choices suggested indifference. Some fans expressed disappointment, arguing that Willis was accepting nearly any role offered. Reports indicated that at one point he appeared in as many as 8 direct-to-video or on-demand films within a single year. Online commentators accused him of needing money or no longer caring about artistic quality. Film analysis channels such as Red Letter Media dissected his performances frame by frame. They pointed out that many scenes showed Willis sitting down, that action sequences relied heavily on stunt doubles, and that some lines sounded dubbed. These observations fueled a growing narrative that his reputation was being used to market films in which he barely participated. Attention also turned toward producer Randall Emmett, who frequently cast aging action stars in low-budget productions, a model critics sometimes labeled geezer teasers. Skeptics questioned whether Willis was being exploited, placed on posters to attract buyers, while his actual involvement remained minimal inside the industry. However, concern was replacing speculation. Directors Mike Burns and Jesse V. Johnson later described troubling moments on set. Willis occasionally fired a prop weapon before the cue was given. At times, he seemed unsure why he was present in a scene. Crew members quietly adjusted schedules to accommodate him. One filmmaker recalled that Willis appeared to be puppeted, guided step by step through basic blocking. Nearly 24 cast and crew members would eventually acknowledge that something felt wrong, even if they could not identify the cause. Yet few spoke publicly at the time. Production continued. Contracts were honored. The broader audience remained unaware. Psychologically, the misunderstanding was almost predictable. Hollywood had long been associated with burnout, financial mismanagement, and fading stars clinging to relevance. Viewers were conditioned to assume decline was a professional failure, not a medical one. As a result, early symptoms of a neurological disorder were mistaken for laziness or greed. By the time the truth emerged, years of criticism had already shaped public perception. What many had judged as a loss of discipline was, in reality, the visible edge of a disease that was quietly reshaping Bruce Willis's mind. Diagnosis and disclosure. The moment that changed everything. On March 30th, 2022, Bruce Willis's family released a public statement announcing that he had been diagnosed with aphasia, a neurological disorder caused by brain damage that affects a person's ability to speak, understand language, read, and write. The statement confirmed that Willis would step away from acting. For many observers, the announcement suddenly clarified years of puzzling behavior. Looking back, earlier signs began to make sense. During promotional appearances around 2019, Willis sometimes spoke slowly, repeated words, or paused mid-sentence. At the time, These moments were dismissed as fatigue or disinterest. The diagnosis reframed them as symptoms of a progressive condition already reshaping his cognitive abilities. Less than a year later. In February 2023, the family shared a more definitive update. Willis had been diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, FTD. Unlike some other forms of dementia, FTD targets the brain's frontal and temporal lobes, areas responsible for personality, decision-making, behavior, and language. The disease often leads to emotional detachment, communication difficulties, and reduced self-awareness. Emma Heming Willis later reflected on the early emotional changes she witnessed. She noticed periods when her husband seemed unusually distant or less responsive. The shifts were subtle at first, but grew harder to ignore. Once doctors confirmed the progression, the family made a unified decision. Willis would retire completely, prioritizing safety, dignity, and quality of life over continued work. The impact was immediate and irreversible. A career spanning more than 4 decades ended almost overnight. Yet those closest to him emphasized that Willis had chosen to keep working as long as he could. According to several collaborators, he approached his final projects with determination, intent on staying active despite mounting challenges. One longtime associate summarized his attitude bluntly. Willis wanted to work until he was nothing but bones. The disclosure transformed public perception. What once looked like professional decline was now understood as the visible consequence of a degenerative brain disease, one that had been advancing quietly while the world was still watching him perform. The tragedy of disease, understanding aphasia, and frontotemporal dementia. To understand the scale of Bruce Willis's decline, it is necessary to examine the conditions behind it. Aphasia is a disorder that disrupts language. It typically occurs after a stroke or develops gradually through primary progressive aphasia, PPA, a neurological syndrome in which language abilities deteriorate over time. Patients may struggle to form sentences, understand conversations, read simple text, or write coherent thoughts. Words that once came automatically can disappear without warning. Frontotemporal dementia, FTD, the condition later confirmed in Willis's case, is more aggressive in its overall impact. The disease destroys nerve cells in the frontal and temporal lobes, regions responsible for behavior, emotional regulation, decision-making, and speech. As these cells die, the brain physically shrinks. The changes are not only cognitive but deeply personal. Common symptoms include sudden personality shifts, emotional withdrawal, reduced empathy, and difficulty communicating. Some patients experience hallucinations or compulsive behavior. Others gradually forget how to perform routine actions such as sitting down safely, getting dressed, or using the bathroom. The disease does not simply weaken memory, it alters the structure of identity. FTD is often compared with Alzheimer's disease, but the differences are significant. Alzheimer's usually begins with memory loss. FTD, by contrast, tends to attack behavior and language first. Families often describe the experience as watching a loved one become psychologically unfamiliar long before they become physically fragile. Neurologist Dr. Allison Reese once characterized advanced FTD as a special kind of hell because patients can lose judgment, personality, and communication at the same time, effectively erasing what she called the entire sense of self. For Willis, the professional consequences were immediate. Acting depends heavily on memory, timing, emotional nuance, and verbal precision. As his language abilities declined, complex scripts became nearly impossible to manage. Scenes had to be simplified. Eventually, performing at a professional level was no longer realistic. Yet there is a painful paradox within many FTD cases. Anosognosia, a condition in which patients are unaware of their own illness. Emma Heming Willis has described this state as both a blessing and a curse. It may shield the patient from fear, but it transfers the emotional burden entirely onto the family. Reports suggest that Willis is no longer fully aware of the extent of his condition or even the magnitude of his past fame. Instead of relying on conversation, he often connects through presence, eye contact, gestures, or quiet recognition. There is currently no cure for FTD. Treatments focus on symptom management, structured routines, and supportive care. The disease typically progresses over years, requiring increasing supervision and medical coordination. The financial cost can be substantial, but the emotional toll is often greater. Research frequently highlights the strain placed on caregivers. Some studies estimate that nearly 30% of primary caregivers for severe dementia patients die before the person they are caring for, often due to chronic stress, exhaustion, or related health complications. The statistic underscores a harsh reality. Dementia rarely affects just one life. Bruce Willis's condition illustrates this broader tragedy. What appears outwardly as a medical diagnosis is, in practice, a long-term dismantling of independence accompanied by psychological, physical, and financial demands that reshape an entire family. Impact on life and career, from personal tragedy to a social lesson. Bruce Willis's diagnosis brought an abrupt end to one of Hollywood's most durable careers. For over 40 years, he had been a bankable star whose presence alone could secure financing and global distribution. That era ended not with a farewell performance, but with a medical statement. Yet his legacy remains intact. Films such as Die Hard, Pulp Fiction, and The Sixth Sense continue to shape popular culture, influence younger actors, and draw new audiences through streaming platforms. His work survives even as his ability to create new performances has disappeared. Behind the public narrative, the adjustment within his family was immediate and complex. Emma Heming Willis later acknowledged that the early phase of the illness forced her to confront possibilities she had never imagined, including whether she could sustain the demands of long-term caregiving. Ultimately, she chose to remain fully committed to her husband's care. The family reorganized their living arrangements to prioritize safety and predictability. Visits became more controlled to prevent overstimulation. Professional caregivers were added. The goal was simple: reduce confusion, lower risk, and protect Willis's dignity. Medical experts often warn that some dementia patients can develop paranoia, agitation, or unpredictable behavior as the disease progresses. Preventive measures, structured routines, calm environments, and physical safeguards are standard practice for the Willis family. These were not dramatic decisions, but necessary ones. Guided by physicians and care specialists, public reaction shifted sharply after the diagnosis. Years of criticism gave way to sympathy. Many fans expressed regret for having misjudged his late career choices. Industry voices also rejected earlier claims that Willis had been exploited. Several collaborators stated that he continued working by choice and took pride in staying active, rather than being forced onto sets. He appeared determined to remain productive for as long as possible. The broader lesson extends beyond a single celebrity. Dementia often advances quietly, its early symptoms mistaken for personality changes, stress, or professional decline. Willis's case highlights the importance of early neurological evaluation when behavioral or language shifts appear. Timely diagnosis can help families plan, secure medical support, and adapt living conditions before a crisis emerges. It also underscores a second truth: no medical strategy can replace the stabilizing role of family. Long-term neurological illness demands coordination between relatives, physicians, and caregivers. Emotional resilience becomes as critical as financial preparation. Bruce Willis's story is no longer just about fame interrupted. It has become a public example of how quickly identity, career, and daily life can be reshaped by brain disease, and how essential informed, compassionate support is once that transformation begins. Life Update through 2026. Health, Care, and Measured Hope. By 2026, Bruce Willis is 70 years old and living under continuous medical supervision. Family updates consistently describe his condition as stable in physical terms. He remains mobile and has not developed major motor impairments often associated with later-stage neurological disease. The deeper decline is cognitive. His language abilities have deteriorated significantly, limiting conversation and comprehension. Yet those close to him note that emotional recognition persists. He responds to familiar faces, gestures, and tone even when words fail. Anosognosia, the inability to recognize one's own illness, remains a defining feature of his condition. Physicians sometimes view this as protective because it can reduce anxiety in patients. For families, however, it shifts the emotional weight outward. Willis is believed to be largely unaware of the extent of his decline, allowing his days to unfold without the psychological distress that full awareness might bring. He now lives in a private residence designed to support long-term neurological care. Located near family members, the home environment emphasizes routine, quiet, and safety. A professional caregiving team provides round-the-clock assistance, coordinating with medical specialists to monitor changes and adjust daily structure when necessary. His schedule is intentionally simple. Short walks, time outdoors, music, and calm interaction form the backbone of each day. Caregivers avoid overstimulation and focus instead on familiarity. Emma Heming Willis has described the family's philosophy as meeting him where he is, meaning they adapt to his cognitive reality rather than trying to pull him back into expectations he can no longer meet. The approach reflects a broader shift in dementia care, from correction to acceptance. Family presence remains central. Emma continues to act as his primary advocate and emotional anchor. Reports indicate that Willis still recognizes her and their daughters, Mabel and Evelyn. His 3 adult daughters, Rumer, Scout, and Tallulah, visit regularly and occasionally share carefully chosen family moments with the public. Emphasizing warmth rather than decline, Demi Moore has also remained involved, reinforcing an unusually unified family structure that places Willis's well-being above past marital boundaries. Beyond the private sphere, Emma has expanded her role into public advocacy. In January 2026, she helped organize a charitable exhibition through Christie's to raise awareness and support research related to frontotemporal dementia. She has appeared in interviews with major outlets, including CNN, and participated in discussions such as Conversations with Cam, where she speaks candidly about caregiver strain, adaptation, and the need for stronger community resources. Her message is consistent. Families should not face neurodegenerative disease in isolation. The challenges remain substantial. FTD is progressive, and no treatment can halt its course. However, the Willis family benefits from financial resources that allow access to high-level medical care, specialized supervision, and a controlled environment, advantages not available to many households confronting similar diagnoses. Despite the gravity of the illness, the family increasingly frames their role not only as caretakers, but as stewards of dignity. Some close observers describe their commitment as a form of mission, an ongoing act of loyalty shaped by decades of shared life. The future remains medically uncertain, yet within the structure they have built, Bruce Willis is surrounded by consistency, protection, and enduring attachment. In that balance between decline and devotion, a quieter form of hope persists, not the hope of recovery, but the hope that even as memory fades, the experience of being loved does not. Conclusion: Bruce Willis's legacy and the lessons within the tragedy. Bruce Willis's life story now carries a stark contrast. He was once viewed as an indestructible screen presence, the resilient hero who survived explosions, outsmarted villains, and carried some of Hollywood's most profitable films. Today, he faces an opponent no performance can defeat, a progressive brain disease that strips away language, independence, and eventually, identity. His decline is not the result of scandal, failure, or excess. It is the consequence of a neurological condition that does not discriminate between ordinary lives and global fame. Yet if illness has closed the final chapter of his acting career, it has not diminished his legacy. His films remain part of modern cinematic language, studied and revisited across generations. More quietly, another legacy has emerged, one defined by humility, privacy, and the strength of a family that reorganized its entire world around his care. The public no longer sees Bruce Willis running across skyscrapers. Instead, they see a family demonstrating what long-term devotion looks like when the spotlight fades. In many ways, the story feels unfinished, but complete at the same time. The action hero's narrative did not conclude with a dramatic farewell. It continues through acts of patience, protection, and unconditional presence. What once entertained millions is now overshadowed by something more enduring. The evidence that a life's meaning is not measured solely by achievement, but by the relationships that remain when achievement is no longer possible. His diagnosis has also contributed to a broader awareness of frontotemporal dementia. The disease is still widely misunderstood, often recognized only after irreversible progression. Willis's case reminds audiences that early behavioral or language changes deserve medical attention, and that caregivers require structured support, education, and community resources. Despite the irreversible nature of FTD, his current life offers a quieter form of hope. Meaning has not disappeared. It has simply changed shape. Stability, familiarity, and emotional connection now define success. Emma Heming Willis once suggested that love does not retreat in the presence of tragedy. It adapts to it. Her message encourages a deeper reflection. Health is fragile. Time is finite. And the people beside us ultimately become the measure of a life well lived.